Welcome, everyone, to episode 27 of Popcorn Peeps, the podcast in which we venture through the Hollywood Reporter's top 100 films of all time and give our thoughts along the way. My name is Jordan Costa. In this episode, we will be discussing the 1974 Western comedy Blazing Saddles, directed by Mel Brooks, starring Cleavon Little and Gene Wilder. This film was awarded a place in the U.S. National Film Registry in 2016 and won at the BAFTAs, the Writers Guild Awards, in addition to receiving multiple Oscar nominations. But to preface this episode, I would like to acknowledge that we are four white dudes about to evaluate if racism is okay for the purposes of comedy.
White dudes?
And Sarah. Three white dudes and Sarah.
Thank you, Jordan.
Okay, dudes. Okay. I want to adopt dude as a gender neutral term so we can all be dudes.
Good luck with that.
Yeah, have fun.
No, thank you.
Oh my gosh. Okay, three dudes and one dudette.
Okay.
I just wanted to point that out just so people are aware of who we are if they have not seen a video version, because of course, audio podcast. But without further ado, I'm here to break down burning saddles in my notes. I'm here to break down Blazing Saddles with the sheriff, Chris McMullen.
Howdy.
The gunslinging Craig Moore.
Yeehaw!
And the nefarious Sara Alexander.
Hey, partner.
So what are your first impressions of Blazing Saddles?
Honestly, the more I sat on this, the more I understood how it made the list.
I get it. I think this movie's great.
Yeah.
I am interested to hear your opinions on this because my opinion on this movie was it was all peaks and valleys. There were some great jokes that made me laugh really hard, and then there was a lot of crap that just went nowhere and wasn't entertaining.
There was very little crap.
There's not 1 second in this film that made me laugh. Not one joke.
It would make me laugh if the only thing you laughed at was the Broadway scene that all of us hated. That would make it perfect.
You love theater, Chris.
Not all theater. I thought Blazing Saddles was a really funny movie, and I would argue that it's the funniest movie on our list so far, going above movies like Airplane and Ghostbusters. The shock factor alone, you get the rug pulled out from you right at the beginning, you lose your footing, and then Brooks and co just hit you with punch after punch. They don't pull anything back, and quite frankly, it is very fucked up. But I think arguing that what it does is ineffective is kind of a fool's gambit. It's hilariously absurd through its writing, but that's how it identifies how absurd racism is in the first place. The black people in this film are the most normal people, and then the white people are batshit crazy. Like when they're in Rockridge and they need a sheriff, they would rather contend with Lamar's goons than have a black man protect them, and it's so outlandishly insane. I think it's so obvious what the intention here is, to point out how dumb racism was and not play into racism as it's okay or anything like that.
I agree, Jordan. I think you have to look at the time too. Obviously, like, this came out 10 years after the Civil Rights Act was passed. And so we're watching this now, and I'm sure the mood that back then was like, oh my God, I can't believe the use of the N-word. Like, I'm white and I'm not that bad. I don't do that. But then it calls you like, what aren't you doing though? Like, the N-word is just a word and it's easy to get inflamed about it. I would never use it, but what else are you doing to better the world? Because if you look at 2016 to 2021, not much has changed with racism in institutions. And I think that's what this movie made me think of, is it's so easy to get upset over a word, but we're literally doing nothing else. But it makes you feel better because, like, oh, I don't say that. Look at those idiotic white people in this movie. My point was that we still just get inflamed about the word, but we've done nothing really since 1964 to be more inclusive within our institutions. But this is an easy target for white people to get upset about.
I agree, and even though people aren't really using the word anymore, I don't think the situation has gotten that much better for minorities, like in terms of how racist people are. I think people are just more closeted about it because now it's less acceptable to be overtly racist, but I really think global mindshare isn't really that different.
No, and so you can laugh at it in the movie and be like, oh my God, like these moronic white people, they're awful. But it's like, what are we doing? Like, sure, we're not using that in our vocabulary, but what else are we doing in our day-to-day life to move that goalpost?
If anything, at least this is bringing attention to an issue of inequality.
Yeah.
Even if you watch this in 2021, it's going to start a conversation about equality, racism in a modern context, and that's more than a lot of content. That's why I think it's the best comedy, is because not only do I think it's funnier, I think what it's trying to say is of value even years later. Like, it stands on its own. Like, Venkman in Ghostbusters was crude because that was what was viewed as cool or relatable or funny at the time, but years later time didn't side with that, whereas this, I feel like time really has sided with it. Like, it still has a meaning. It can still prop up a discussion.
I'll put that with the caveat of that I think it handled maybe black race relations well, and that is where I drew the line. Mel Brooks in red face didn't cut it for me. I thought that was super cringe. It was almost regressive on its LGBTQ plus platform. And then I also didn't like that it went into the usual trope of the sexualization of black men. Like, oh, she loved him because he had a huge dick. Like his personality, or that he was nice to her.
I agree. I feel like it's really unfortunate that it brings up this interesting discussion about racism, but then you have all of this backlash against the LGBT community.
Okay, let's talk about this movie. Can we talk about the movie for 5 minutes?
Do you want to talk about the
'Cause
movie,
holy
Craig?
smokes, yes. I think you guys are asking for a lot more from a comedy movie about cowboys and Indians. Like, holy smokes. The way I watched this movie was I tried to watch it as a comedy. And there was some pretty funny moments. My favorite joke in the whole bit was after the sheriff kind of got tossed around by called all kinds of names, told to get the hell out of here and everything by the citizens, and Gene Wilder's sitting there and he tells them, like, you have to understand these are poor Americans, the unformed clay of the West, morons. I thought that was hilarious. That was a really good joke. They led you up, built you up, and then hit you with a good punchline. But there were so many jokes in this movie that were like 20-minute long walks for a weak punchline.
That was not true. Most of them were so snappy.
Are you really? Because we watched a German woman stand up and sing
that
for
we
like
all agree
5
on.
minutes that went nowhere. The ending to the movie...
That's the only
The
part.
ending to the movie was a joke that seemed like they just didn't know how they wanted to wrap it up. So they were like, well, I guess we just put them in a car and drive away. A lot of the jokes were boring.
That was funny.
They was all build up with no payoff.
To me, this was just a mean-spirited, lowbrow, offered nothing. Not once did I crack a smile. Not once. It was insulting.
And this is funny. The highbrows at Warner Brothers, when they watched this, also did not laugh. But when they took it down to everybody who worked in the office and screened it, everybody laughed. So maybe you're just more highbrow than us, Chris. Jordan and I are just two plebs here.
He has tickets to the opera, Sarah. We've already established this.
There was a very long scene where the bad guys were all lining up to sign their name in the book of who's going to join the posse to go wreck Rock Ridge. And it was long. It was a long scene showing you every example of a garbage human being that there could possibly be. And there was no punchline. The punchline was the sheriff and his deputy knocked out a couple of KKK guys and almost got caught. That was the punchline for that joke.
Okay, that was the funniest joke in the entire movie. When they're behind the rock and the two KKK guys are there, and Bart comes out and goes, hey, where all the white women at?
That's my favorite
That was so
line.
funny. They are like rush behind the rock to beat this guy and get the reversal, get bopped, and that's how they try to infiltrate. In terms of like setup and payoff, that was immediate. And that scene was just a space for that joke to exist.
But the payoff was at the beginning of the joke then, so that's like, what's the point of that? So you gave me this opportunity to tell me a joke. You told a joke, I went, haha, that's funny, and then you continued telling the joke. Shut up, you already got the laugh.
I think it's a two-part. They got the laugh about like conning the Ku Klux Klan, but then they became the Ku Klux Klan to get in line. That's like a two-parter, Craig.
But it wasn't
I think
funny.
you're expecting more.
Yeah, how dare I expect comedy from a comedy
They're
film?
allowed to.
Craig has spent so much time with me and my beautiful comedy that he just has such high expectations from everyone else. I don't know, comedy is always an unruly beast because for it to be effective, it has to like ride the line, right? And if it's riding the line and possibly, well, actually crossing the line in 1974, then to view it from this perspective, obviously it's going to be out of touch. And to view something like this, you have to kind of understand where it came from and view it as like a piece of cinema history and not necessarily as something tailored to your modern taste.
So somebody who lived in that decade, this was not considered funny. The jokes they made in there was not what, it was just for shock value. It was mean and stupid.
Yeah, that's all it was. Every joke was just, look, I can't believe he said that.
Yeah.
And that was every joke was, I can't believe he said that. And it was funny the first couple of times, but holy crap, it was like an hour and a half of, I can't believe he said that.
No, but the whole point is that it's like these people are so absurd and so cruel to these black people that it makes you realize how absurd the idea of racism is in the first place.
Yeah, and I got that in the first 20 minutes.
And when Richard Pryor wrote it, he allowed the word in there because he got a lot of pushback from the actors. And he said in the 1800s, this would have been what was said. So it makes it more historically accurate for the time.
Yeah, so that gives some of the African American stuff a pass.
Yeah.
But the
Pryor and Little both advocated for the use of it.
Yeah, it's great that it's in there, and it probably should have been in there, but it didn't.
okay, well, but that's what I'm saying. That's okay. But did they have somebody who was gay
No.
on the writer's staff that thought that horrendous fucking scene with the dancers was? Did they put their stamp of approval on it? It was awful.
No, and we acknowledge that. We understand that. Well, we think the commentary in one element is well. It's 2 steps forward, like, whatever. 2 steps back, however many you want to take.
My big problem with this is making racism or homophobia or whatever this ridiculous allows your everyday run-of-the-mill racists to go, oh, I'm not like that. That's too much. This is, oh, yeah, you've turned them into some ridiculous character that, so my daughter can't date a black guy, but I would never say something like that to their face. This is just, it's taking it to the extreme, and it gives people who think that way a pass because they're not at that ridiculous level.
I understand your point, Chris. I think I kind of get it. A person might be like, I'd never call a black guy the N-word, but I certainly wouldn't give him a job. I can't wait for that to get clipped out of context and I'm gonna get canceled for sure.
I get what you're saying, but I don't know. Maybe it's because that's not the mindset I would have. That's not my first intention to view it as such. And I understand where you're coming from, and I see that as a feasible point. But does it not come back to like what the creator's intention was?
No, it doesn't. No, intention means nothing.
No.
The road to hell is paved with good intentions.
Have we had this conversation before?
I think intention matters, but it's not the only
not at all.
thing that matters. And for me, the quality of the filmmaking, it didn't tell a cohesive story. The narrative was disjointed and all over the damn place. They started a joke at the beginning. I don't know if you noticed this. They started a joke where every time someone would say Rock Ridge, it would be immediately repeated. Rock Ridge, Rock Ridge, Rock Ridge, Rock Ridge, Rock Ridge. And they just abandoned it halfway through the movie because it was like they realized it wasn't funny.
But the whole movie's anachronistic and it's meant to be, so I don't know if it's, I don't know, you just take what you get out of it. Like, it's not meant to be a cohesive story.
I think that's a cop-out.
Mel Brooks said that he's intentionally started things and abandoned them as part of the themes of the film. So, I mean, whether or not you think it's demented, it may or may not be, but it was by design.
What a bad way to make a film.
If you want to create this eclectic barrage of nonsense, I think it actually makes that eclectic feeling more prominent. If you're setting up things and then abandoning them halfway, it's intentionally disjointed for the sake of whatever, absurdity. That's the whole theme, absurdity.
Just because he did it intentionally doesn't mean it was a good decision. I don't think that it helps the ranking on this list. You're trying to make a comedy. If you're a comic, I'm gonna, give you a little bit of the insight on how to be funny here. But what you do is you start telling a joke, all right? And then you finish the joke. And that's how you tell jokes. And they didn't do that enough.
I don't know if you are the person to be telling Richard Pryor how to make a joke. Wasn't he voted like the #1 comedian of all time?
This film is not evidence in his favor.
Not at all. So if you want to see absurdity done well, you watch Monty Python.
Yeah, I agree.
I love Spaceballs. It's another Mel Brooks movie. So, and that has a lot of far more intelligent and refined, right? This is just a sophomoric attempt at something that he later became better at, and I don't like it.
It's just a lot of shock humor. You get a lot of laughs from watching it going, oh my God, I can't believe they said that.
Yeah, for 2 minutes. No, well, like I said, not once did I laugh.
And then by the time you get to the German
Oh
woman's
my God. That was long.
5-minute musical, it's all worn off. It's not, and after that point, it's not funny anymore. The movie stopped being funny at that point. They made this whole big thing about her character where she was gonna seduce the sheriff, and then it ends up she gets played by the sheriff because he's got a big wang, and that's the joke. And then that's it. That's it for her character. They had her tied up. They could have done the classic throw her on the railroad and have the sheriff have to go rescue her. No, they just abandoned the character. It's over.
I got what I needed out of her, yeah.
Well, so did the sheriff.
Yeah, good for him.
It's not just because he has a big wang. It's because he's a nice guy.
And the fight scene scene at the end, I would have cut it.
It was fine. It did its bit or whatever. We all acknowledge that this is the worst part of the movie, but honestly, like you say, the jokes ran and then this ran too long. This movie is what? 1 hour and 33 minutes? Really, the perfect runtime for this movie is 1 hour and 30 minutes. You make that dance scene 3 minutes shorter, and I wouldn't make it any shorter than that. I don't think it needed to be. I think it was very concise. It did what it wanted to do in its runtime, and I honestly didn't feel like there was a single lull in the entire run, to be honest. Like,
really? How can that be true, Jordan? You were just as bad by that Broadway scene as the rest of us.
He's just gonna cut it.
No, I said I would make that scene 3 minutes shorter, but I wouldn't cut the rest of it. I would leave it exactly as is. I thought it was as long as it needed to be and nothing felt drawn out.
I spent the entire movie waiting for it to be over.
What about that long scene with the governor? That where he had all those yes men in the room. The one guy wasn't even paying attention. That was a long scene that went nowhere too.
That was just going to show that the leadership behind wherever this place was in the West was run by, again, morons, idiots, buffoons. That's the whole point of it. That was its intention.
The world would be a better place if this movie didn't exist.
They kept bringing the character out for no reason though.
Which character? The governor?
The governor.
He was in what, like 2 scenes. Was he the one in the bathtub?
No.
That would have been Headley.
Yeah, that was Headley. I only remember the governor in the one scene where his assistant is out there with her a bosom showing. I agree. I would have also changed that in hindsight.
He comes out from behind the curtains.
I don't know. I didn't feel like we saw too much of the governor. And I thought Headley was fine. Headley made me laugh. That scene with the rubber duck, fucking loved it. You know what? I watched it 3 more times on YouTube afterwards. No. He's just like stroking it like Schmeagol stroking the ring. And I'm fucking busting laughing here in my room all by myself with this stupid rubber frog. Yeah, I don't know. I don't agree with everything Blazing Saddles does, but I feel like writing it out entirely, that's just not how I feel about it. I don't think it's worth writing off entirely. A lot of it, yes. All of it, no.
And I thought it was great that you have a movie where your protagonist is a black man and his sidekick is a little white guy. Something you haven't really seen a lot of. And yeah, I thought it did handle racism in an interesting way, and that it makes you laugh and it makes you think, oh, I'm not those white people. But then at the same time, like, what are you doing in your everyday life to make it any better?
I'd like to make one comment. I really agree with the point you had, Chris, about how someone who is more subtly racist would view this as a justification for themselves. And I can't discredit that point, but from my perspective, that's not how I operate. So if I'm just viewing this and taking this in like a closed ecosystem where it's just me and this film, then that thought doesn't even cross my mind. And so a lot of those hindrances or that ideology wasn't tainting my viewing experience. And so I could understand if that's the first thing that came to your mind, why you would really dislike this.
Yeah, but the thing is, you spent the first 10 minutes of this podcast talking about all the great things it did for race relations and talking about racism and making a caricature out of white racist people. And then you just said that you didn't even consider those points when judging the movie.
I still think it builds the discussion, and I think if you're willing to have an intellectual discussion about racism, it's an awesome diving board to discuss kind of what's wrong with the world, if you're willing to be intellectual about it.
So the problem is, for people who aren't racist, this will not help at all. And for people who are racist, they can use it as a tool to say, yeah, I mean, I might not let my daughter date the guy, but at least I don't call him the N-word.
Oh, I don't agree even a little.
But there's no harm in having a discussion about modern race relations, even amongst people who aren't racist.
But that's not what this was. That trying to put that on there is...
I mean, you can agree to disagree.
It doesn't.
I don't think that this movie triggers a good modern discussion.
If we were going to do a discussion on race relations, would this be the movie you'd pick?
No.
Right.
But we didn't pick it.
It's just mean and stupid.
We're trying to pull out why we think it made this top 100 list.
Because people are idiots?
I think it made the top 100 list because people think it's funny. I disagree. I don't think it's that funny.
To me, the fact that people find this funny is disturbing.
It's funny as fuck. Last night, I stayed up till 1 a.m. watching specifically black people react to scenes from Blazing Saddles for the first time. And you know what they all said? This is funny as fuck. And they laughed and they got it right away. They understood what the intention was.
It seems like it was written by a black man for a black audience. And that's good because, like, Dave Chappelle is funny AF. But I don't think that this movie was funny. It was funny for like the first 10 minutes. And then I was like, okay, I get it.
And that's fair.
No Froggy Craig?
The frog scene again. The frog scene was funny the first time when he was like, "Oh, where's my rubber frog?" And then it carried on for like, "Where is it? Where is it? It's got to be around here. Oh, there he is over there. Go get me my rubber frog."
The clip on YouTube is 44 seconds long, Craig. The clip is 44
Holy
seconds long.
smokes.
You cannot tell me it is too long. 44 seconds. And 44 seconds including the time that Lamar grabbed the dude's junk, which wasn't even the funny part of the scene. The froggy scene, or the funny part of the scene, was only 20 seconds long.
So it was 20 seconds of watching a grown man freak out because he can't find his rubber frog.
Yeah, I loved it.
That's not that funny.
It is. It is. All right. Do we want to talk about some characters?
I was just going to say only one joke was cut from the whole movie. And it was the scene where Black Bart and Lily von Schtupp are together and the lights are out. And she's like, it's true. It's true. And he was supposed to have said, but you're sucking on my arm. And that was the only thing that didn't make it. So I thought that was weird that that's the line they drew.
I feel like that would have fit right in with the rest of it. I think it's interesting that Brooks pinpointed that as where the line was because it seemed on brand for the rest of it.
I feel like they could have afforded to cut 20 or 30 more jokes.
I'm going to cut you.
Did you say you're going to cut me? Jesus.
Bart. What do you guys think of Bart?
I liked Bart. I thought he was funny.
I think it carries a lot of the movie, especially Cleavon Little's performance. He's just this normal, charismatic dude going about his job, trying to live his life, get people to like him, and his response to a lot of the racism, I think, is what sets it up to be so absurd. He's like, guys, I'm just trying to do a job here. I'm just trying to protect you. I don't know. See, this is unfortunate because I thought about why I liked this character before I was attacked so viciously. I just think his everyday kind of perspective on the situation is what really roots the racist themes in this movie as so absurd. And you can definitely disagree with it, but that's why I thought Bart's performance in particular stood out as a cornerstone of why this movie works for me and why a lot of it's funny.
Well, he's the lead, and he did an excellent job with his lead role. His best scene, in my opinion, is towards the beginning of the movie where everyone's got a gun to his head, and he puts his own gun to his head, and he's like, nobody move or the sheriff gets it. And they're like, he's not messing around, boys. And he holds himself hostage and then takes himself over to the jail. I thought that was really well done. The joke was friggin' hilarious.
I think that was my least favorite joke from
Oh,
him.
really? I thought it was hilarious, man.
I don't think it was out of place or anything like that. I just thought if their intention was to kill him anyway, why are they concerned?
And it's funny, he's a guy who's on this railroad group and he attacks his boss, and so he's sentenced to death, so he's a criminal, and they send him to be a sheriff, and he's the nicest guy. He actually tries to help out the town.
He was wronged on the railroad. That's why.
Yeah.
He was always a nice guy, but this motherfucker threw the lasso in to rescue the cart and left poor Bart in there. That guy had a shovel coming to him.
$400, Jordan.
That guy had the shovel coming to him, and Bart knew what was right.
Yep.
That guy deserved a clonking.
He was good. He was fine. He was just an everyman.
Yeah, he was very much one of those characters that I think you're intended to put your own face on.
He was definitely an everyman.
To identify with the main character.
Yes, for sure. He was the eye guy, 100%.
I think it's interesting that Richard Pryor was the first in line for this role, and Mel Brooks went to studios begging for them to approve it, but they couldn't insure him because he had a history of drug crime.
Cocaine.
Yeah. He couldn't get the role. He wrote the movie, probably wrote this role for himself, couldn't even get it. And so I just think it's great that the Cleavon Little did such a good job, considering like he wasn't even the first choice or it wasn't written for him, and he kind of stepped in close to the end and just killed it. What about our boy, the Waco Kid, aka Jim?
The fastest gun in the world.
I thought Gene Wilder was really funny. Even just from his first scene where he's upside down from the bed. And, are we black? Like, that was funny.
I like it, even though it's really tropey. I know a lot of this movie is very tropey, but gunman turned alcoholic, hangs up his pistols or whatever, and then gets a cause to come back out of retirement and do some good for the society. Normally I would be like, this is too cliche. I don't know if I'm into it, but I think it's just because I simp so hard for Gene Wilder that I would watch him in basically anything and just enjoy it. So I don't even know if I could really critique Jim because I'm just there for it.
He had some great lines in this movie. One of my favorite ones was when Bart asked him, do you need some help? And he said, all I can get.
You know, I take it back. The relationship between those two and the humor between them was actually pretty good.
Because they're the only normal people in the film or whatever. And it's kind of like them against this
Yeah.
this batshit crazy world. My favorite gag, not my favorite gag, but one of my favorite gags in the movie was the chess scene. I love that. Grab it when I say go, and he's standing about 2 meters away, doesn't move a single bit, and then pulls it out of his holster. I love that. And that was actually a scene in SpongeBob SquarePants that I really enjoyed and didn't even understand that it was an homage to Blazing Saddles until yesterday. He becomes a superhero and he has super speed and he goes, yo, you want to see me run to that rockin' back? You want to see me do it again? And the frame doesn't move at all. And yeah, it was a Blazing Saddles joke. See, that's the thing. Like, this is why list is so fun to go through, is because there's so much of this crap littered in all of our pop culture. And so, heck, even if I didn't enjoy this movie, at least I'd learn a little bit about its influence on some kind of media later on, even if it's kids media.
It's SpongeBob.
Even if it's SpongeBob.
Well, even the joke about his hand, like you could see that one coming, like when he's like, well, it's so steady, and then his other one was like this. I still laughed. The delivery was excellent.
It's shit like that, Craig. Like, that wasn't funny. That wasn't good.
Yeah, that was funny. That's what I said. This movie is peaks and valleys. There are some moments that I found very funny, and then there was half the film that I was like, what am I doing watching this thing?
90% of the film.
You think 90? I don't know. I would say half the jokes didn't land for me.
I just found so much of it so off-putting.
Yeah, it already had soured the mood for you, so that you weren't in a mood to giggle anyway. I think it's interesting that Cleavon Little was the second choice and comes in, and then you have your second star here, who was actually a third choice. The role was originally designed for John Wayne, but he didn't want anything to do with it because it was so crude for his more family-friendly image. Then they brought in Gig Young, who collapsed during the first scene of filming from alcohol withdrawal, and I thought, hey, that's really clever casting. Get the alcoholic to play the alcoholic, but hey, in showbiz, sometimes that don't work out so good. And so Gene Wilder was brought out as like an emergency replacement. And so you've got Cleavon and Gene Wilder, who just get brought in at the last minute to fill these roles in this film that turns out to be huge, and it's their chemistry that really solidifies a lot of why people like this film. The only main comment I have is we didn't get a lot of character development from Bart. We get a little bit more from Jim because he finds his purpose, but Bart seems very consistent throughout the entire thing. I know what your answer is going to be, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Were you at all upset by a lack of character development within Blazing Saddles?
No, because I was not expecting any. He was brought into this town to do a job. He did it surprisingly well, and he's ready to move on to the next place. I don't need more.
That's not true. That's not true. The reason why I give the character development a pass is because I feel like it developed the entire town of Rockridge. They start out as someone who loathes this black man trying to run the show, and by the end of it, they don't see him as a black person. They see him just as a person. They don't want him to leave. They're like, no, we've developed this relationship with you. We learned a little bit. We grew. We bridged a little bit of that gap between the blacks and the whites in this society, and that's the growth that comes out of it.
This film failed to tell a cohesive story from start to finish, so I'm not irritated that one character didn't get character development because nothing got any development.
It's literally in the theme song. I wrote down the lyrics. Where is it?
The theme song was a banger.
Oh my god. The title track literally starts out, and one of the first lines is, he conquered fear and hate, turned day into night, made a blazing saddle his torch to light the way. Bart's journey was set from the beginning, and he was going to conquer hatred and build this bridge as foretold in this prophecy, this song, whatever, this setup. And that's exactly what it goes and does. That sounds pretty cohesive to me. I don't know.
They definitely didn't write the theme song when they closer to the end of the movie. Definitely came first.
It doesn't even matter. It acts as a perfect link from the beginning of the film to the end of the film to at least establish some sense of cohesive storytelling.
Except if you want to include LGBTQ people or Irish people, or like there was a point in the film where they specifically said, but we don't want the fucking Irish. And I was like, oh, okay.
The point is that they finally get over hating black people, and so they just reassign the target to Irish.
I don't think they got over hating black people. I think they begrudgingly accepted them as part of their community because the alternative was to lose everything and die.
Is that not the 21st century?
No, because even after they win, they don't want him to leave.
Okay.
I hope it's not the 21st century.
What happened in January? 21st century. We're not really any better. We just know how to hide it better.
100% agree. Do you guys have any other characters you want to talk about before we move on to music? Or any moments in the film film you want to talk about that stood out as particularly heinous or particularly enjoyable?
We should probably talk about Headley. He was the main antagonist. He had some funny moments. He drove the story along as much as he could, such that it was. Basically, he wanted to own Rock Ridge. He wanted to steal Rock Ridge because there was going to be a railroad going through there, and then the land would be worth all kinds of cash. And then he hired a bunch of goons to do it, and they failed. The end.
That's why I thought it overall was a cohesive storyline. Like, it had the plot that they were trying to foil the railroad coming through, and everything around that was based on that.
The ending, though, it didn't come around. It didn't end.
Yeah, they couldn't build the railroad through there. They couldn't move the town.
They chased him into real life. They chased him into a movie theater. Like, what the fuck? They chased him into the movie theater so they could watch the movie and find out how it ended. That's literally what happened.
Don't read into it too much.
And then when they drove off into the sunset, like they were riding away, then they got off and got into the car.
It's funny as
That
fuck.
was funny.
I think that would have been funnier for me if I hadn't already seen Monty Python and the Quest for the Holy Grail, where the ending is...
Absolutely. Also, spoilers, Sarah hasn't seen it and it's on this list.
Well, I don't know what to tell you. That's how it ends. Real life.
And that came out 1 year after this, so this movie did it first. So the fact that you had seen it first is irrelevant.
Actually, I think I saw Blazing Saddles first, but I saw Blazing Saddles when I was way too young to have watched Blazing Saddles.
I don't know. Kids are like sponges. If I gave this to a child I don't have, but if I did have one, I would be paranoid that we'd be blurting out certain N-bombs in the grocery store. I thought the villain was just as evil as they needed to be. I thought if you wrote this complex backstory for this villain, you would really detract from what the focal point of the story was. All of this madness, all of this craziness. If you're going to develop a real backstory for this guy and like make people connect with him, I feel like you're really wasting their time when the focus is the absurdity. So I didn't have any issues with that. I just wanted to make a point of it because I normally complain about lack of character development in villains, and this is one of the only times where I'll say, I don't think it mattered. I think it's okay. I think enough development happened, and I think the focus should have been placed elsewhere, so I wasn't missing that development.
Mm-hmm.
You want to talk about music, guys?
I mean, there's only one thing to say. Theme song was awesome.
Yeah, this was a banger.
Yeah.
This was good. This was Slumdog 2 soundtrack.
S tier.
It's a certified banger. The title track is so good. It comes in with this epic flourish, slips right into the Western vibes. You hear that whoosh, the whip cracks. It's corny as hell, but this whole song is so unapologetically cheesy. And this whole movie is so fucking stupid in the first place that it fits right in. And I don't know. It's silly. It's fun. It gets you hyped. It sets that prologue for the film. And then you move on to the next song. You get the Ballad of Rock Ridge. It's catchy. It's silly. It's fun. This whole soundtrack is banger after banger after banger. And I think it's easy to do that because it's so short. It does have that black smudge on it. The I'm Tired song. It could be deleted from history and the world would be better for it. But
Yeah.
I think a lot of this music was far better than most of the music we have seen representing films on this list so far. Chris, did you at least enjoy the music?
No, not even a little.
I'm actually not even surprised at all. I don't even like country, but I was feeling the vibes.
I thought that theme song was good. And the problem with it was that it set the tone to be so great. And then, like, right out of the gate, there's a guy faints on the railroad and they say, dock that, slanderous word for an Asian person, a day's pay for sleeping on the job. And I was like, Jesus Christ. Right out of the gate, they're hitting us with both barrels.
I liked the theme song too, and I liked the Ballad of Rock Ridge because they both gave us enough background of what was happening, so we didn't need the screen time to fill it in. Like that brought us up to speed for both. So I thought that was a clever way to do it.
I agree, and it was an entertaining way to provide exposition.
The age-old thing in film, tell, don't show.
No, but you can tell so long as it's a banger. You can tell in the form of a banger. If you're not going to show it, present with good tunes.
Jordan certified.
That's the caveat. That's the rule. That's the why is sometimes a vowel. It's sometimes okay to tell so long as you've got a thumping banjo line ripping through it.
I liked it. I wouldn't have wanted this movie to be any longer, so I was thankful for the songs.
All right. Do you guys want to rank this film? Let's start with Chris. Chris, where are you going to put this movie?
You really want me to go first?
Yeah, I do. Wait. Before Chris ranks it, do we think Chris will put it lower than Deer Hunter?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's definitely going to put it below Deer Hunter.
So I've been struggling with the ultimate place for this on the list, and it's tied for last place,
can't
but
tie.
I'm actually
That's
putting
illegal.
it one higher than Deer Hunter.
Wow.
So Deer Hunter still nothing has knocked it off its rightful place at the end.
That's shocking.
Like it's not because one is better than the other. It's just that I think I hated Deer Hunter more.
It was longer. Yeah.
I just want the meme to die, so I was hoping Chris would put Blazing Saddles underneath it.
When I think about it, the wedding scene is enough to keep the fact that I'm Tired was only 5 minutes long instead of 45 minutes long is probably why I ultimately put it above Deer Hunter.
They both suck, but Deer Hunter was in last first, so it gets priority.
That was the longest hour 33 of my life. I'm not kidding. We're sitting there watching the movie. I'm like, how much more is left?
It was the longest 5 minutes of my life.
I was giggling the whole time. You were probably looking
me
over
too.
like, what can I use in the kitchen to stab this motherfucker?
If I had to erase 2 movies from existence, this is the one I'd like to not exist.
Why don't you put it lower than Deer Hunter?
Deer Hunter doesn't hurt anything. I feel like this actually does.
Just
but
deer.
Yeah, I
Just
don't know. Maybe
deer.
I do need to flip it.
I get it.
Yeah, I think I just convinced myself. It is. It's worse.
Yeah, I think if the movie that gets erased has to be on the bottom.
I wish this movie never existed.
Craig, we're gonna put it.
Was this how we're doing this? We're going to go rank them from bottom to top?
Yeah.
Like, I gotta tell you, this movie bored me. It wasn't as funny as it said it was on the label. Everyone talks about this movie being some great comedy, and half the jokes just got ignored. They just got forgotten about, and there was never a punchline. Chekhov's gun sat on the table and never got fired for half the damn jokes. So I'm putting this at number 25 below Airplane and above only, and I feel bad about this because this means both Gene Wilder movies are at the bottom of my list, Bonnie and Clyde.
Fucking
Jordan's
bastard.
#1 movie.
See, the problem is Chekhov wasn't in this movie. This film technique, we call it the Waco gun, in which nothing gets used.
That was a better joke than any of the jokes that were in
You
that.
just stole my line. I
was
was
good,
going to
Jordan.
say that.
Thank you. Where are you gonna pop this bad boy, Sarah?
I compared this to Airplane and Ghostbusters. And Airplane, I did not find a cohesive storyline in it. And I thought this one did have a better story. And then Ghostbusters physically made my skin crawl. So I'm ranking this at 14th, below Inception and above Bonnie and Clyde. I'm keeping my Gene Wilder movies together.
That's interesting. This entire movie made my skin crawl.
I will not be keeping my Gene Wilder movies together. I'm gonna put this bad boy at 9, underneath Dr. Zhivago and above Slumdog Millionaire, because we keeping bangers together, boys. I mean, and Sarah.
This is just a playlist.
It's a playlist.
His ranking is just a soundtrack playlist.
No. 12 Angry Men is at 4. That has no music. Well, it has
No bangers.
2 minutes of music. Yeah, it doesn't have any bangers. But it was in itself a visual banger. No. I don't want to call it a visual banger. I want to call it a narrative banger.
Nice.
What are we going to be watching in episode 28 of Popcorn Peeps?
Hopefully a palate cleanser of 1976 All the President's Men. You can find that on Crave Stars and Stars Prime if you already have those subscriptions, and then all the other usual suspects if you want to rent or buy.
If you'd like to support the show, you can check out our Patreon. Your patronage is always appreciated, but never required. Without further ado, we would like to thank Jim Walmsley, Ryan Saranen, Travis Laporte, Frank Costa, Sarah Renier, Erica Wilson, Tyler Laporte, Pauls Johnson, Luke at my ass, Luke at my ass, and Dick my butt. Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening to the show, guys. We'll see you in episode 28. Until then, have a great night, afternoon, evening, or whenever you're listening. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.